let's say, up to 5 sightings in the same year. All of that will stop within a year, and then it comes back about 4 to 6 years later.
Okay.
I believe that calls are associated with mating rituals. And I believe that these females are having babies about every 4 to 6 years and going back into certain places. And I believe males travel around looking to spread their seed
to keep the species going.
Different, right. But that's just me speculating. There's no evidence of that. It's just me looking at the long-term evidence of where calls and sightings are happening. And that's just kind of the idea I'm kind of venturing into.
Well,
and
we're going to touch base on this again because we are up against our top of the hour news break. I can't believe it, but we'll be gone for 5. Good time to stretch out.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Sony Pictures Classics' new film, Never Look Away, from the writer-director of Academy Award-winning The Lives of Others, and inspired by real events, in select theaters now.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. Bipartisan border security negotiations broke down in Washington today ahead of a Friday deadline to reach a spending agreement to avoid another partial government shutdown. Lawmakers and the White House clashed over whether to limit the number of migrants authorities can detain, along with the restrictions on border funding. NPR's Mara Eliason has more.
For the president, the big dilemma is what's best for him politically. You heard him give a State of the Union address last week, which was really the first speech of his reelection campaign. He's going down to the southern border this week. That could be considered his first 2020 election rally. He's going to have a rally in El Paso. So the president has to decide, is it better for him to compromise with Congress, or is he concerned that the amount of money for border security that he'd have to agree to is so small that his base would think he has wimped out on the wall?
NPR's Mara Eliason. Trump's rally in El Paso is tomorrow night. Virginia's embattled Democratic leaders are standing firm despite a nearly unanimous call by politicians in and out of the state to step down. The public's reaction, though, is more divided, as NPR's Cheryl Corley reports from Richmond.
The 3 men in the center of this political crisis are Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, Attorney General Mark Herring, both criticized for appearing in blackface years ago, and Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, who says sexual assault charges leveled against him are not true. Although there have been mounting calls for all 3 to step down, the patrons at Mama J's restaurant in Richmond had much more of a wait-and-see attitude about the lieutenant governor, and 55-year-old Chuck Small says Governor Northam should remain in office.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying blackface is okay, but I'm like, you got to have some forgiveness, right? And know what the Bible always says?
The governor says he plans on using the turmoil here as a tool to promote racial reconciliation. Cheryl Corley, NPR News, Richmond.
Teachers in Denver plan to strike tomorrow over pay. NPR's Claire Lombardo reports bargaining fell apart last night after months of negotiations with Denver public schools.
After district leaders introduced a new proposal, union leaders ended negotiations, saying the district was playing games. They indicated they'd be open to resuming bargaining on Tuesday. The union is pressing for changes to teacher pay, especially to the system of bonuses that some educators receive. The 2 groups have been negotiating for over a year. About 70,000 students in Denver schools will be affected by the strike. The district hopes to keep most schools open with help from substitutes, though preschools will be closed due to staffing requirements. Claire Lombardo, NPR News.
Snow is piling up in the Pacific Northwest from a powerful storm that's left several motorists in eastern Washington state stranded in heavy drifts, and many highways are closed. Several people say they had to abandon their cars on the roads, and authorities say at least a dozen had to be rescued. Drivers are being asked to stay off the roads. You're listening to NPR News from Washington. The city of Paris is suing Airbnb in what has been a long, contentious battle over regulating vacation rentals. Jake Ciganero reports the lawsuit could cost the rental platform up to €12.5 million.
A new Paris housing law requires vacation rentals be registered with City Hall. It also limits rentals to 120 days a year. The city recently found at least 1,000 unregistered properties on Airbnb. Each illegal listing risks a fine of more than €12,000. Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo told French media she doesn't have anything against people trying to make a little extra cash. She wants to shut down property owners who only rent to tourists and who keep out locals in a city already short on housing. Since 2011, Paris has lost 12,000 inhabitants a year. The Paris mayor assigns a heavy amount of blame to rental companies like Airbnb. According to media reports, Airbnb alleges Paris's rules violate European Union standards and says the city's regulations are overly burdensome. For NPR News, I'm Jake Saganero in Paris.
At the weekend box office, the Lego Movie 2, the second part, easily took the top spot with $35 million in estimated ticket sales. The animated sequel had been forecast to draw around $50 million. Taraji P. Henson's What Men Want, that's a loose remake of the 2000 Mel Gibson comedy, debuted with $19 million. In third place, Lionsgate's Cold Pursuit, debuted with $10 million, in line with expectations, despite the controversy that surrounded its star, Liam Neeson, in the week leading up to the film's release. I'm Janine Herbst, and you're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Did you know you can ask Google Home to play NPR podcasts for you? It's easy. Just ask. Like, play the Fresh Air podcast. Use Google Home or Google Assistant to connect with your favorite shows anytime.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour. Hello there. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. I am Kat Hobson, your host. This is a fascinating show. I hope you're enjoying it. And if you had to miss that first hour, no fear. We're available with our archives on iHeart, iTunes, and in Google Play, as well as Podbean, Stitcher, and a couple of other locations as well. And tonight's guest is Shelly Covington-Montana. And I'm so fortunate to have you here, Shelly. I am enjoying this conversation. I am fascinated by some of the things that you're bringing up. I had a couple of questions that I wanted to bring in from the first hour, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. I'm enjoying myself.
Thank you. You know, we were talking and you had mentioned that without a body, no matter how it's acquired, but without a body, you can't really do the testing that would need to be done to ascertain species, to ascertain, you were talking about the immune system, all these other things that would be beneficial to us as a species to have information on. And I'm curious because if these creatures are loners, they do have a social structure, I would assume, because they do propagate. And we were talking about that right before the break. But where are the bodies? Why aren't there any around?
Well,
in your opinion. I know it's an opinion, but...
Yeah, exactly. It's an opinion, but... And I'll say, it's very, very rare to find a bear body in the woods. And we know they die.
Yes.
Now, what we have to understand also is it depends on... So right now, I have a game cam on... My family has a ranch here in Texas, and we raise cattle, and we have cattle that die periodically. We just had 3 cows die and a horse not long ago of blackleg. Even though we had done all the medical and vaccinations this spring, we do them every spring, sometimes it doesn't work. So I put a game cam on one of our cows that has died, and we have a boneyard, as we call it. And it really depends on the environment that they're in. Let's say that a Sasquatch just lays down and dies, and let's say it's a quote unquote rogue male. Let's say it's a young, a 20-year-old guy who doesn't live with his parents anymore, and doesn't live within a family unit, but he's out looking to procreate, right?
Right.
He just lays down and dies because he got injured somehow. It really depends on the environment. Summertime, things are going to disintegrate extremely quickly. In the Pacific Northwest specifically, it's very wet and humid, and things can disintegrate quite quickly. We don't know that these things, like all other wildlife, will go and hide themselves when they know they're going to die.
Cats do that.
I don't understand. Yeah, so I don't understand why they do that, because wildlife, in general, it's not an easy life. You don't get to live out old age. You are either killed by other animals or you die of disease, and then scavengers come and scatter your bones. So when we don't, quote unquote, find bones, it really doesn't bother me when it comes to Sasquatch, because I think they're intelligent enough to go and hide themselves. And this is the other thing. Their morphology, about the way they are built, I consider them rock apes. And what I mean by that is I believe these things can scale a flat wall in a matter of seconds, and they live high and above everything else.
I've heard that theory expounded.
They're just built that way. I used to be a bodybuilder, and if you look at what the average description of a sighting of a Sasquatch body, how he was built, looks like a bodybuilder, and the upper body is massive and dense and thick and just full of muscle, and their arms are longer than their legs, and so on and so on. Their triceps and their lats are huge, and that tells me they're climbers. They can scale up a wall. And if you take into account Dr. Meldrum's ideas about the mid-tarsal break, the front of the foot can get really flat and really wide and slap along. I mean, think of is it the chameleon, the little desert lizard that can climb up walls? I think of Sasquatch that way. I believe truly that Sasquatch falls on all fours and scampers across the forest floor a lot more than people realize, simply to hide himself. Because from point A to point B, when people say, hey, I saw the Sasquatch, I looked away and I looked back and he was gone, I don't think he ran off. I think he fell to the forest floor and scampered off. But as far as why we don't find bones, I think they go high and far away to where most men have never been and are able to hide themselves. Maybe we've actually found those bones in the archaeological discoveries, but I don't know. Or maybe we will someday, and then, some people believe that they buried their dead, and I don't know about that, but it's a possibility if they're that kind of intelligent. But anyway, I just believe that environmental, entities are what are causing us not to find bones, because we don't find bare bones. We don't find mountain lion bones very often. And we know we have plenty of bear and we have plenty of mountain lion, but we don't find their bones very often because they go off and they hide and they die in areas where they're not found by other scavengers.
That's interesting. I had heard, all kinds of different things because I live near the Talladega National Forest,